The tropical sun hangs low over the Philippine Sea on October 24th, 1944, casting long shadows across the flight deck of the USS Lexington. The air tastes of salt and aviation fuel, thick with the tension that precedes combat. The metal deck radiates heat absorbed during hours under the merciless sun, making the surface shimmer like a mirage. 6 Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighters sit lined up like predators ready to pounce, their engines ticking as they cool from the morning's patrol. Each aircraft bears the scars of previous engagements, patches of replacement aluminum standing out against weathered paint, bullet holes repaired with riveted metal plates. Lieutenant Commander David McCampbell stands beside his aircraft, sweat already darkening his flight suit despite the early hour. At 34 years old, he's older than most carrier pilots, a survivor in a profession where youth dominates because youth doesn't live long enough to grow old. His hair is starting to gray at the temples, his face lined with the accumulated stress of too many missions, too many friends lost, too many close calls. But his eyes hold the sharp focus of a man who has learned to survive in a sky filled with death. Those eyes miss nothing, scanning the horizon with the automatic vigilance of someone who knows that a moment's inattention can mean the difference between life and death. He runs his hand along the Hellcat's fuselage, feeling the warm metal beneath his palm. This aircraft has kept him alive through dozens of missions. He knows every quirk in its handling, every vibration that signals normal operation versus mechanical trouble. The ground crew chief, a weathered petty officer from Texas, has maintained this fighter with the dedication of a craftsman. Every rivet is tight, every system functioning at peak efficiency. In aerial combat, mechanical reliability isn't just important, it's everything. The carrier's deck crew moves with practiced efficiency. Their movement's a choreographed dance of preparation and urgency that has been perfected through countless repetitions. Young men, most barely out of their teens, perform tasks that require split-second timing and absolute precision. A mistake on a carrier deck can kill not just the person who makes it, but everyone nearby. Mechanics make final adjustments to engine cowlings while ordnance teams double-check ammunition feeds, their hands moving with the confidence of muscle memory. The smell of hydraulic fluid mixes with the ever-present scent of ocean salt. Somewhere below, in the depths of the ship, the engineering crew tends to the massive boilers and turbines that give the Lexington its speed and power. The radio crackles with chatter from the Combat Information Center deep within the ship's armored hull. Radar operators track contacts on their green glowing screens, plotting courses and speeds, trying to separate friendly aircraft from enemy. The CIC is the ship's brain, processing information from multiple sources and converting it into tactical awareness. McCampbell can hear the tension in their voices, even through the static. Something unusual is happening out there in the vast expanse of the Pacific. McCampbell can feel it in his bones. Something big is coming. It's an instinct developed over months of combat, a sixth sense that veteran pilots learn to trust. The air feels different somehow, charged with anticipation like the atmosphere before a thunderstorm. Around him, other pilots feel it too. They move with heightened awareness, double-checking equipment they've already checked, running through mental checklists one more time. If you appreciate stories of courage and tactical brilliance from history's greatest battles, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's witness how 6 American pilots defied impossible odds. The briefing had been clear but grim. Japanese Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, a massive fleet including the super battleship Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, was steaming toward Leyte Gulf, where American ground forces were vulnerable during their amphibious landing. The Yamato alone displaced 70,000 tons and carried 18-inch guns capable of throwing shells weighing more than a small car. Accompanied by heavy cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels, Kurita's force represented one of the last major concentrations of Japanese naval power. If they reached the landing beaches, the result would be catastrophic. The fate of thousands of soldiers depended on the thin line of carriers and their aircraft. Those men, Marines, and Army infantry were pinned down on beaches and in shallow beachheads, unable to retreat, unable to maneuver. They had minimal artillery support and no way to defend against battleship guns firing from beyond visual range. Every pilot knew that if the Japanese fleet broke through, the invasion would turn into a massacre on the beaches. Brothers, cousins, friends from hometowns across America were down there, depending on the Navy to keep the enemy fleet at bay. McCampbell had flown combat missions since the invasion of the Marshalls earlier that year. He'd seen friends incinerated in mid-air explosions, their aircraft transformed into fireballs in the blink of an eye. He'd watched parachutes fail to open, had seen men fall 4 miles into the ocean with nothing but screams on the radio to mark their passing. He'd pulled men from burning cockpits, their flight suits melted to their skin, their faces unrecognizable. He'd written letters to widows and mothers trying to find words that could somehow make sense of senseless death. The mathematics of aerial combat were brutal and simple. Most pilots didn't survive their first 10 missions. He'd flown over 100. Every mission brought him closer to the statistical probability of death. The law of averages said his luck would run out eventually. Every pilot knew this, lived with this knowledge every day. Some dealt with it through superstition, carrying lucky charms, or following elaborate pre-flight rituals. Others adopted a fatalistic attitude, accepting their probable fate with grim humor. McCampbell dealt with it by focusing on the mission, on the tactical problem at hand, on keeping his skills sharp and his aircraft in top condition. Control what you can control, accept what you can't. His wingman, Ensign Roy Rushing, approaches across the deck, moving with the slightly bow-legged gait of someone whose knees have absorbed too many hard carrier landings. At 22, Rushing represents the new generation of naval aviators, trained in the massive pipeline that had transformed American aviation from a peacetime force into the largest air armada in history. Unlike McCampbell, who learned to fly in the lean pre-war years when aircraft were scarce and training hours limited, Rushing and his contemporaries benefited from an industrial mobilization unprecedented in human history. They trained on purpose-built aircraft at purpose-built facilities, taught by instructors who themselves had combat experience. His face is young, but his hands are steady. Those hands have already fired guns in anger, have already felt a Hellcat shudder from battle damage, have already guided a crippled aircraft back to a moving carrier deck. McCampbell had requested him specifically after watching the ensign handle his Hellcat during a typhoon landing 2 weeks earlier. The storm had been fierce, the carrier pitching 30 degrees in heavy seas, the deck rising and falling through a vertical range of 50 feet. Rushing had brought his damaged Hellcat aboard on the first pass, threading the needle with the calm precision of a surgeon. That kind of skill under pressure couldn't be taught. You either had it or you didn't. The two pilots share a nod, a brief acknowledgement that contains volumes. They've flown together enough to develop the wordless communication that marks effective combat teams. Each knows how the other thinks, how they'll react in different situations, where they'll be without having to look. In aerial combat, this kind of partnership can mean the difference between coming home or becoming another statistic in the casualty reports. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of cooking from the galley several decks below. Somewhere in the bowels of the ship, cooks are preparing the evening meal for 3,000 men. The smell of fresh bread mixing with the salt air creates an oddly domestic moment in the midst of war. Somewhere below deck, men are eating what might be their last meal, though none of them think about it that way. They think about letters from home that arrived in the last mail call, about girlfriends and wives thousands of miles away, about the mechanical tasks that keep them alive and sane. They think about baseball scores and movie stars, about cars they want to buy and houses they want to build, about futures they're fighting to secure. McCampbell thinks about his wife back in Alabama, about the farmhouse they'd bought just before the war started. He thinks about the son he's never met, born 3 months after he shipped out. His wife sends photographs, but they seem unreal somehow, two-dimensional representations of a life he can barely remember. The boy would be walking now, maybe saying his first words. McCampbell wonders if his son will remember him when this is all over, or if he'll be a stranger returning to a home that has learned to function without him. He carries a photograph in his flight suit pocket, creased and worn from constant handling. A reminder of what he's fighting for, why he climbs into a machine of aluminum and gasoline day after day and flies toward people who want to kill him. A runner emerges from the island's superstructure, his face flushed from climbing ladders at a dead sprint. The young sailor, probably 18 at most, gasps for breath in the humid air. His eyes are wide with urgency, his movements jerky with adrenaline. The message is brief but electric. Radar has detected a massive formation of Japanese aircraft inbound from the west, bearing down on the carrier task force like a storm front. The radar operators in the CIC are tracking at least 60 contacts, possibly more. The formations are cohesive, disciplined, indicating experienced crews flying with purpose and determination. The Combat Air Patrol is already engaged, but there are too many enemy planes. The American fighters on station are being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Voices on the radio frequency are getting more urgent, more desperate. The fighter director is calling for reinforcements for any available aircraft to get airborne immediately. Every available fighter needs to launch now, not in 5 minutes, not in 2 minutes now. The carrier task force is at condition red, general quarters sounded, every man at his battle station. The deck erupts into controlled chaos. The air boss's voice booms over the loudspeakers, calling pilots to their aircraft with the clipped urgency of a man who knows that seconds matter. Deck crews scatter to their positions, each man knowing exactly what needs to be done. Chalk pullers sprint to the aircraft, wheel chocks flying away as soon as they're removed. Plane directors wave their colored paddles, guiding aircraft toward the catapults. Fire crews stand ready with foam and hoses, praying they won't be needed but prepared if they are. McCampbell and Rushing sprint toward their Hellcats, their boots hammering against the deck with metallic thuds. 4 more pilots converge from different directions, all members of Air Group 15, all veterans of the grinding campaign across the Pacific. Lieutenant Junior grade Eugene Valencia, a California farm boy with reflexes like a gunfighter and a gunnery score that set records in training. Ensign James Rigg, a former college football player from Michigan who flies his Hellcat like he's breaking through a defensive line, aggressive and fearless. The others are equally skilled, equally determined, all of them veterans who've survived long enough to develop the instincts that separate the living from the dead. They've been tested in the crucible of combat and emerged as the kind of pilots who can be counted on when everything goes wrong. McCampbell hauls himself into his cockpit, the metal hot under his hands from hours baking in the tropical sun. The familiar smell of the cockpit envelops him, a mixture of oil, hydraulic fluid, cordite residue, and leather. His plane captain, a 19-year-old from Michigan named Johnson, helps strap him in with practiced efficiency. Johnson's hands work quickly, tightening straps, checking connections, making sure everything is secure. The young man's eyes betray his fear, not for himself, but for the pilots he sends into battle shift after shift. He's watched them take off, and he's watched them not come back. He's pulled bodies from crumpled cockpits and hosed blood off metal decks. But he does his job with dedication, because it's all he can do. McCampbell gives him a thumbs up, a gesture of confidence he doesn't entirely feel. Johnson returns it with a tight smile and drops off the wing, running clear of the propeller arc. McCampbell begins his pre-start checklist, his hands moving with automatic precision. Fuel selector on main tank, mixture rich, prop full forward, throttle cracked 1 inch. Magneto switches to both, battery on, fuel pump on. Each action is deliberate, practiced thousands of times. In the air, there's no time to troubleshoot basic systems. Everything has to work the first time. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine roars to life with a cloud of blue smoke and a shuddering rumble. The sound is visceral, physical, a thundering vibration that travels through the airframe into McCampbell's chest, into his bones. 18 cylinders arranged in 2 rows, displacing 2,800 cubic inches, producing over 2,000 horsepower. American Industrial might condense into a single engine, one of thousands being produced every month in factories that never sleep. Around him, 5 more Hellcats spool up, their propellers becoming invisible discs in the afternoon light, creating a hurricane of wind across the deck. The deck trembles under the combined power of thousands of horsepower, the steel flexing slightly under the strain. The catapult officer gives the signal, a dramatic sweeping gesture with his green flag. McCampbell salutes sharply, a ritual acknowledgement that he's ready, that his aircraft is ready, that the catapult crew should send him hurtling into the sky. He braces himself against the seat back, knowing what's coming but never quite prepared for it. He advances his throttle to full power, feeling the Hellcat strain against its brakes like a racehorse at the starting gate. The engine roar increases to a scream, the whole aircraft shaking with barely contained energy. The catapult fires with a violent lurch that slams him back into his seat with crushing force. In less than 2 seconds, the Hellcat accelerates from 0 to 90 miles per hour. The deck rushes past in a blur, then suddenly there's nothing but air beneath the wings. For one heart-stopping moment, the heavily loaded fighter seems to hang on the edge of stalling, dropping toward the wave tops that look close enough to touch. Then the wings bite into the dense air and the Hellcat begins to climb, the powerful engine dragging it skyward through sheer brute force. McCampbell breathes normally again, the momentary terror of the catapult launch fading into the background. He raises the landing gear and feels the aircraft accelerate as drag decreases. The other 5 fighters launch in rapid succession, each pilot experiencing that same moment of fear as the catapult throws them off the deck, that same relief as their aircraft transitions to flying speed. Within 90 seconds, all 6 Hellcats are airborne, the carrier already shrinking behind them as they form up on McCampbell's wings with the precision of constant practice. They join into a fighting formation, each pilot maintaining position through tiny adjustments of throttle and stick. They climb through scattered clouds at full military power, the engines screaming as they devour fuel at an alarming rate. The fuel gauges visibly drop as the R-2800s gulp 100-octane gasoline at a rate of over 100 gallons per hour. At this rate, they'll be on fumes in less than 2 hours. But that's a problem for later. Right now, the priority is altitude and speed. Height is life in aerial combat. The fighter with altitude advantage can choose when and where to engage. The fighter caught low is at the mercy of gravity and geometry. McCampbell checks his instruments with automatic precision. Fuel gauge, oil pressure, coolant temperature, ammunition counters. Everything nominal. 600 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total. Enough to kill a lot of airplanes if he doesn't waste ammunition. The radio comes alive with urgent transmissions. Other combat air patrol flights are already engaged, their voices tight with adrenaline as they call out enemy positions and coordinate attacks. The tactical picture is becoming clear, and it's terrifying. Japanese bombers and fighters, dozens of them, possibly as many as 60 aircraft inbound in a massive strike package intended to overwhelm the carrier task force's defenses. At 15,000 feet, McCampbell spots them. His heart rate increases, adrenaline flooding his system. A formation so large it seems to darken the western sky, stretched across miles of airspace like a swarm of locusts. He counts quickly, his experienced eye assessing numbers and types. Twin-engine Mitsubishi G4M bombers called Bettys by American forces, flying in tight defensive boxes designed to concentrate their machine gun fire. He can see at least 40 bombers, possibly more. Escorting them are fighters, sleek Mitsubishi A6M Zeros that had terrorized Allied forces in the war's early years, their maneuverability legendary, their range unmatched. The formation is heading directly for Task Force 38, where the vulnerable carriers float like sitting ducks. The carriers are the key to everything. Without them, there's no air cover for the invasion force, no way to attack Japanese shipping, no mobile airfield to project power across the vast Pacific. The Japanese know this. This massive strike is intended to sink or cripple the carriers, to restore balance to the naval war, to give their embattled forces some breathing room. For the Japanese pilots flying toward the American fleet, this is more than a mission. It's possibly their last chance to change the course of the war. The mathematics are insane. 6 Hellcats against 60 Japanese aircraft, 10-to-1 odds. Any rational tactical doctrine would call for them to wait for reinforcements, to coordinate with other flights already in the air, to avoid engagement until they had numerical parity, or at least something approaching reasonable odds. Navy doctrine calls for fighter divisions of at least 12 aircraft when engaging large bomber formations. 6 fighters against this many enemies isn't brave, it's suicidal. But there's no time for doctrine or prudence. Every minute the Japanese formation flies unchallenged brings them closer to the carriers, closer to their drop points, where they'll release torpedoes and bombs that will sink ships and kill thousands. The other combat air patrol flights are already engaged, their ammunition running low, their formation scattered by the furious combat. There's no one else. It's these 6 Hellcats or nothing. McCampbell's voice cuts across the radio, calm and measured despite the situation. He issues orders with the economy of words that comes from countless hours of combat. Valencia and Rigg will take the high cover, watching for enemy fighters diving from above. The other 2 pilots will guard their 6 o'clock, preventing enemy fighters from getting on their tails. McCampbell and Rushing will go straight into the bomber formation, breaking up their defensive cohesion. The distance closes rapidly. McCampbell can see individual aircraft now, can make out the red Hinomaru circles on their wings and fuselages. Anti-aircraft fire from the carriers begins to dot the sky with black puffs of flak, but it's too scattered, too weak to deter the massive formation. The Japanese pilots have orders to press home their attack regardless of losses. They're committed to a one-way mission if necessary. McCampbell rolls, inverted, and pulls through, diving toward the bomber formation with Rushing tight on his wing like when they're connected by an invisible rod. The airspeed indicator needle swings past 300 knots, past 350, past 400. The Hellcat's airframe groans under the stress, metal creaking and popping as aerodynamic forces push against design limits. The dive angle is steep, nearly 70 degrees, using gravity to add energy to the attack. Wind screams past the canopy, a banshee wail that drowns out even the roar of the engine. G-forces press McCampbell deep into his seat as he begins the pull-out, his vision tunneling as blood drains from his head. He can see the bombers growing larger in his gun sight with terrifying speed, can see their defensive gunners tracking his approach through their teardrop-shaped canopies. He can see the details now, the weathered paint on their fuselages, the oil stains streaming from their engines, the square windows in their fuselage sides. These aren't targets on a gunnery range. They're aircraft crewed by human beings, men who woke up this morning and climbed into these machines knowing they might not survive the day. Men with families, with hopes, with fears, exactly like his own. Tracer fire begins to streak past his canopy, green and white lines of phosphorescent death that seem to move in slow motion, despite their actual velocity of nearly 3,000 feet per second. The Japanese rear gunners are good, experienced men who've survived months of combat through skill and luck. Their fire is accurate, concentrated, deadly. Multiple gunners track the same target, coordinating their fire to create a cone of destruction that's nearly impossible to evade. Abeti's defensive armament includes multiple machine gun positions, capable of firing in almost every direction. In formation, the bombers create overlapping fields of fire designed to destroy attackers before they can get within effective gun range. McCampbell jinks his Hellcat left and right, using the fighters' superior maneuverability to throw off their aim. Each evasive maneuver costs energy and throws off his own gunnery solution, but it's necessary. A single burst of tracer fire passing so close he can see individual bullets, fat cylinders tumbling end over end through the air. They pass so close he could reach out and touch them if the canopy weren't in the way. His mouth is dry, his heart hammering against his ribs. Time dilates in the way it does in combat, seconds stretching into eternities. He selects a Betty on the formation's edge, an aircraft slightly separated from the main body, its pilot, perhaps, dealing with engine trouble or inexperience. The bomber fills his gun sight, growing larger with each heartbeat. McCampbell centers it in the sight, the ring and pipper optics crude compared to what will come later in the war, but effective enough for a skilled pilot. He's fired thousands of practice rounds, tens of thousands, has internalized the deflection angles and lead distances required to hit a maneuvering target. His brain does calculations that would require a room full of mathematicians with slide rules. Angle off, relative velocity, bullet drop, time of flight. All of it happens in a fraction of a second, processed by neural pathways trained through endless repetition. At 400 yards, he squeezes the trigger. The distance is closer than ideal, but necessary to ensure hits with the limited ammunition available. 6 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns erupt with a sound like tearing fabric amplified 1,000 times, a sound that obliterates all other noise. The Hellcat shudders from the recoil, slowing perceptibly as the guns dump their kinetic energy into the airframe. Brass casings stream from ejection ports, glinting in the sun as they tumble away. The rate of fire is devastating, each gun cycling at 800 rounds per minute, 3,200 rounds per minute total when all 6 guns fire together. Each gun firing creates a visible stream of tracers, every 5th round loaded with phosphorus that ignites on impact. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds walk across the Betty's right wing, sparking where they punch through aluminum skin like it's tissue paper. Each bullet carries tremendous kinetic energy, enough to tear through metal, shred hydraulic lines, sever control cables. The bomber is unarmored, designed for speed and range rather than survivability. Its aluminum skin is thin, barely thicker than a soda can, offering no protection against 50 caliber bullets traveling at nearly 3,000 feet per second. McCampbell's fire finds a fuel tank, and the wing explodes in a sheet of orange flame that blooms like a malevolent flower. The explosion is violent and immediate. One moment the Betty is flying, the next it's a fireball trailing smoke and burning fuel. The bomber rolls inverted and falls away, trailing fire and pieces of wreckage. McCampbell has a momentary glimpse of the cockpit, sees figures silhouetted against flame, men burning to death while falling 4 miles to the ocean below. He doesn't let himself think about it. Can't think about it. Not now, 1 down. 59 to go. The mathematics are still impossible, but at least they're moving in the right direction. The defensive formation begins to fragment as pilots react to the attack. Some bombers break left, others right, their tight formation discipline dissolving under the stress of combat. This is exactly what McCampbell wanted. Isolated bombers are vulnerable bombers, unable to concentrate their defensive fire. Rushing scores his first kill seconds later, a Betty that tried to dive away. The ensign's gunnery is precise, economical bursts that conserve ammunition while achieving maximum effect. The bomber's port engine erupts in flames and it begins a shallow spiral toward the ocean 4 miles below. Valencia and Rig up high are earning their pay. 3 Zeros detach from the formation and climb to intercept, but the 2 Hellcat pilots use their aircraft's superior speed and diving capability to avoid engagement while maintaining their overwatch position. A Zero tries to pursue Valencia into a dive, but the Japanese fighter lacks the power to keep up. The Zero pilot pulls out, conserving his aircraft's energy for another attempt. McCampbell lines up on another Betty, this one trying desperately to maintain formation discipline despite the chaos erupting around it. The pilot is good, flying steady despite tracer fire from multiple directions, maintaining his position in the formation even as aircraft around him explode and fall. This kind of discipline speaks to training and courage. The bomber crew knows they're probably going to die, but they're determined to complete their mission first. His ammunition counter is already down to 1,800 rounds, the numbers clicking down with each burst. He's burning through bullets faster than he'd like, but there's no choice. Economy of ammunition versus certainty of kills. Miss with a short burst, and you need to make another attack run. Fire a longer burst, and you're more likely to score a kill, but you'll run out of ammunition sooner. He fires a long burst that tears through the Betty's fuselage, the 50 caliber rounds punching through from tail to nose. He can see pieces flying off the bomber, aluminum skin peeling away, pieces of structure separating. The cockpit canopy shatters, and he knows the crew is dead or dying, killed by bullets or flying glass or shrapnel from disintegrating structure. The bomber noses over into a terminal dive, completely out of control. The elevator's shot away, or the pilot's dead at the controls. It falls in a spiral, the spiral tightening as it picks up speed, the wings beginning to twist from aerodynamic forces. 3 down for McCampbell, personally. His ammunition counter shows 1,400 rounds remaining. A Betty tries to escape by diving toward the deck, the pilot hoping that high speed and low altitude will let him evade pursuit. But McCampbell has altitude and experience. He rolls inverted and pulls through, the negative G-forces making his vision blur momentarily. The dive is nearly vertical, the Hellcat's speed increasing rapidly. His airspeed indicator passes 500 knots, approaching the aircraft's design limits. The control surfaces are stiff, requiring both hands on the stick to move them against the aerodynamic forces. He pulls out of the dive barely 500 feet above the wave tops, close enough to see individual white caps. The Betty is right in front of him, close enough that he can see the rivets on its fuselage, the Hinomaru circles on its wings, even the rear gunner frantically trying to aim his weapon. McCampbell fires and holds the trigger down, a long, sustained burst that empties half his remaining ammunition. Tracers converge on the Betty like laser beams. The bomber's tail disintegrates, the entire empennage torn away by the concentrated fire. The Betty cart wheels into the ocean in a spectacular splash, water geysering 100 feet into the air. Pieces of wreckage skip across the wave tops like stones. 4 down. His ammunition counter shows 800 rounds. That's maybe 2 more kills if he's careful, 1 if he's not. The engagement devolves into a swirling furball of aircraft, tracers, and burning wreckage. The orderly formations have dissolved into chaos, individual aircraft maneuvering desperately, pilots fighting for their lives in 3 dimensions. The sky is full of tumbling machines and parachutes, some American, but mostly Japanese. White silk blossoms mark where pilots have abandoned their doomed aircraft, choosing the uncertain fate of the ocean over certain death in a burning cockpit. McCampbell's radio is alive with transmissions, pilots calling out targets and threats, warning each other of enemy aircraft in their blind spots. The radio discipline that's supposed to keep communications clear has broken down under the stress of combat. Everyone is talking at once, voices overlapping, urgent calls mixing with screams and sudden silences that are worse than any sound. Valencia and Rig up high continue their deadly work. A Zero makes the mistake of trying to dive on one of the other Hellcats, and Valencia catches him in the middle of his attack run. The Zero, for all its legendary maneuverability, can't match the Hellcat's diving speed. Valencia's guns chew through the Zero's tail section, and the fighter tumbles out of control, its pilot unable to recover from the damage. The Zero's lightweight construction, designed to maximize range and maneuverability, becomes a liability when hit. Unlike the robust Hellcat, which can absorb significant battle damage, a Zero can be destroyed by just a few hits in the right place. Rig finds himself in a turning fight with another Zero, the kind of dogfight that the Japanese fighter was designed to win. The Zero can turn inside almost any American fighter, its low wing loading and light weight giving it an edge in traditional maneuvering combat. But Rig doesn't fight on the Zero's terms. He uses the Hellcat's superior power and structural strength to execute a violent barrel roll that would tear the wings off a Zero. The Japanese pilot tries to follow, and his aircraft shudders on the edge of breaking up. Rig uses that moment of hesitation to reverse direction and fire a burst that catches the Zero's engine. Coolant sprays from ruptured lines, and the engine seizes, the propeller freezing in place. The Zero glides down toward the ocean, a 4-mile descent with no power. Down lower, the other 2 Hellcat pilots guard against attacks from below, their eyes constantly scanning, necks aching from the constant motion. In aerial combat, the pilot who spots the enemy first usually wins. The pilot who gets surprised usually dies. They watch for the telltale glint of sun on canopies, the contrails that mark high-altitude aircraft, the dark specks against clouds that might be enemy fighters. Every pilot learns to constantly scan the sky, to never fixate on one target long enough to be ambushed. A Zero latches onto McCampbell's tail, its pilot skillful enough to stay in position despite the Hellcat's frantic maneuvering. McCampbell can see tracer fire reaching toward him, getting closer with each burst. The Japanese pilot is good, adjusting his aim, leading the target. In another second or 2, he'll score hits. Rushing saves McCampbell's life. The ensign comes screaming down from above, his 6 guns blazing. The Zero disintegrates under the concentrated fire, its lightweight construction no match for the heavy bullets. Pieces of the fighter rain down, spinning and tumbling through the air. McCampbell doesn't have time to thank him. Another Betty looms in his gun sight, and he fires, aiming for the cockpit area. The canopy shatters, and the bomber begins a gentle descent, its dead crew still strapped into their seats. 4 down for McCampbell personally. His ammunition is below 1,200 rounds now. He's going to run out of bullets before he runs out of targets. The Japanese formation is in complete disarray. What had been a coordinated strike package is now a scattered mob of aircraft trying desperately to reach their target or escape. Some bombers jettison their weapons early, torpedo and bombs splashing harmlessly into the ocean. Others press on, determined to complete their mission even as Hellcats tear through their ranks. Valencia scores a double kill, catching 2 Bettys trying to reform. His ammunition discipline is perfect, short bursts that conserve bullets, while achieving maximum destruction. Both bombers explode within seconds of each other, massive fireballs that briefly light up the afternoon sky. The other pilots are equally lethal. Rig, the football player, uses his Hellcat's strength to muscle through violent maneuvers that would tear apart a lesser aircraft. He catches a Betty trying to escape at wave-top altitude, firing until the bomber cartwheels into the ocean in a spectacular splash. Time loses meaning in combat. Seconds stretch into hours. Hours compress into heartbeats. McCampbell's world narrows to his gun sight, his instruments, the constant calculations of speed and angle and ammunition remaining. His flight suit is soaked with sweat despite the cold at altitude. His hands ache from gripping the control stick. His neck burns from constantly scanning for threats. The ammunition counters tick down relentlessly. McCampbell is down to 600 rounds, enough for perhaps 2 more kills if he's precise. Around him, the air is thick with smoke and debris, falling aircraft leaving contrails of flame and oil. The ocean below is dotted with wreckage and life rafts, Japanese survivors floating in the tropical water with no hope of rescue. McCampbell finds another Betty attempting to sneak through at low altitude. The bomber is flying just above the wave tops, hoping to evade detection. But McCampbell has the altitude advantage, and he uses it, diving down with the sun behind him. The Japanese gunners don't see him until it's too late. He fires his remaining ammunition in one sustained burst, walking his fire from the Betty's tail to its nose. The bomber explodes so violently that McCampbell has to pull hard to avoid flying through the debris field. His guns are empty. 6 aircraft destroyed personally, his ammunition completely expended. But the battle isn't over. Japanese aircraft are still threatening the carrier task force. He stays in the fight, using his empty Hellcat to make mock attacks that force enemy pilots to maneuver, disrupting their bombing runs. The other 5 pilots continue the slaughter. Rushing, Valencia, Rigg, and the others work with methodical efficiency, shooting down bomber after bomber. The Japanese formation has been completely shattered. What had been an organized strike force is now a collection of burning aircraft falling from the sky or fleeing in desperation. The radio reports from other combat air patrol flights paint a similar picture. The massive Japanese airstrike, launched with such hope and determination, has been utterly destroyed before reaching the carriers. American pilots from multiple squadrons have torn through the enemy formation like sharks through a school of fish. McCampbell checks his fuel gauge. He's running on fumes, barely enough to make it back to the carrier. The other pilots report similar status. They've been in combat for what feels like hours, but has actually been less than 12 minutes. 12 minutes of the most intense aerial combat any of them have experienced. They form up and turn toward home, leaving behind a sky full of smoke and falling wreckage. The ocean below is littered with debris fields marking where aircraft hit the water. Here and there, parachutes drift down. Japanese aviators who've survived the destruction of their aircraft but face an uncertain fate in the vast Pacific. The USS Lexington appears on the horizon, a welcome sight after the chaos of combat. The carrier's deck is a hive of activity, crash crews and firefighters standing ready, ordnance teams preparing to rearm and refuel aircraft for another mission. McCampbell approaches in a wide pattern, his fuel gauge reading nearly empty. The landing signal officer guides him in with practiced hand signals. McCampbell cuts his power and drops toward the deck, his arresting hook extended. The Hellcat slams down hard, the hook catching the number 3 wire. The deceleration throws him forward against his harness with brutal force. But he's down, he's safe, he's alive. The other 5 Hellcats land in rapid succession, each pilot dealing with the unique challenges of landing a fighter on a moving deck with nearly empty fuel tanks. All 6 aircraft make it safely aboard, a small miracle given the intensity of the combat they've just survived. McCampbell climbs down from his cockpit on shaky legs, his body trembling with adrenaline come down. His plane captain greets him with obvious relief, having spent the last hour listening to the radio reports of the furball. The young mechanic helps him out of his parachute harness and flight gear. The intelligence officers are waiting, eager to debrief, while the details are fresh. McCampbell and his pilots gather in the ready room, their flight suits still dark with sweat, their faces marked with the imprint of oxygen masks. The debrief will take hours as they reconstruct the engagement, correlate their claims, piece together the tactical picture. The initial assessment is staggering. The 6 Hellcats, led by McCampbell, have destroyed or damaged over 20 enemy aircraft in that 12-minute engagement. McCampbell personally has shot down 9 Japanese planes, bringing his total score to 34 victories, the highest tally of any American naval aviator. But it's not just about personal scores. The 6 pilots, working as a coordinated team, have helped break up one of the largest Japanese airstrikes of the entire Philippine campaign. The bombers that should have devastated the carrier task force have instead been scattered and destroyed. The carriers remain operational, their aircraft available to continue supporting the ground invasion at Leyte. News of the engagement spreads through the ship. In the hangar bays, mechanics work with renewed determination to prepare aircraft for the next mission. In the mess halls, sailors discuss the battle with the exaggerated enthusiasm of men who aren't doing the dying themselves. In the medical bay, doctors and corpsmen prepare for casualties that thankfully never arrive from this particular engagement. McCampbell stands on the flight deck as the sun sets over the Philippine Sea. The horizon is clear now, empty of enemy aircraft. In the distance, columns of smoke mark where Japanese ships are under attack from other American air groups. The great naval battle that will later be called the Battle of Leyte Gulf is reaching its climax. He thinks about the Japanese pilots, most of them now dead, who flew their mission with the same determination and courage as any American aviator. War doesn't care about bravery or skill. It only cares about mathematics, about which side can bring more force to bear, more quickly, more efficiently. Today, the mathematics favored the Americans. Rushing joins him at the rail, his young face aged by the afternoon's combat. They don't speak, both lost in their own thoughts about what they've experienced, what they've done, what it means. In the war's calculus, this has been a successful mission. In human terms, it's been a slaughter. The carrier turns into the wind, preparing to launch another strike. More Hellcats line the deck, their engines warming, their pilots climbing aboard. The war continues its grinding advance across the Pacific, island by island, battle by battle, moving inexorably toward the Japanese home islands. McCampbell will fly many more missions before the war ends. He'll survive when so many others don't. Will accumulate a total of 34 confirmed aerial victories. Will become the Navy's all-time leading ace. But he'll never forget this afternoon, these 12 minutes when 6 Hellcats took on impossible odds and won. The story of this engagement will be told and retold, becoming part of naval aviation legend. How 6 pilots, outnumbered 10 to 1, broke up a massive enemy strike through superior tactics, training, and courage. How they proved that individual skill and team coordination could overcome numerical disadvantage. How they wrote another page in the history of carrier aviation, demonstrating the effectiveness of the air defense doctrine that would protect American ships for the remainder of the war. As darkness falls over the Pacific, McCampbell heads below deck. There are reports to file, maintenance issues to address, plans to make for tomorrow's missions. The war grinds on, indifferent to individual achievements or sacrifices. But for this one day, 6 pilots and 6 Hellcats made a difference that mattered. They saved lives, protected ships, helped secure victory in a crucial battle. In the vast machinery of global warfare, their contribution was a single gear turning, but it turned at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. The mathematics of courage and skill, of training and determination, had produced a result that defied the simple odds, 6 against 60. 12 minutes that changed the course of a battle, protected thousands of soldiers on the beaches below, and demonstrated what naval aviation could achieve when pilots, aircraft, and tactics came together in perfect synthesis. This is the story that deserves to be remembered, not as fantasy or exaggeration, but as historical fact. 6 Hellcats, 6 pilots, and 12 minutes that proved courage and skill could overcome seemingly impossible odds when the stakes were nothing less than victory or defeat in humanity's largest conflict.